whose carriages had mostly originated in the Chinese city of Yiwu. It was the first symbolically significant feature of the UK's engagement with the BRI. A freight train covering almost 7,000 miles, crossing China, Central Asia, and Europe. It was a cold day, and only a dozen or so people turned up to the ceremony. There was no fanfare in the press. The story was barely covered in the UK. The few stories that did appear were dismissive. They said the train journey was being funded by Chinese government subsidies for PR purposes, and that the carriages were going back to Yiwu empty. One day, historians might look back at that event and wonder where the crowds were. $90 billion of funding, 78 countries, 2/3 of the world's territory. It is remarkable that one of the greatest and most extensive plans for global development should arrive in an important capital city to not just no applause, but to almost zero public interest. Ladies and gentlemen, New Chemin, Sien Chemin. My name is Kitty Smith, and I run a strategic communications consultancy on China-Europe affairs. This afternoon I'm going to speak to you about the BRI and the UK. There's been a lot of discussion around the BRI in the CPEC, the China-Pakistan corridor, in Eurasia, Sri Lanka, Malaysia, and of course in Africa. But Europe also has an important role to play in the BRI. And it's a very different role than the role being played by developing economies. I think it's important for countries like Sweden to study how countries which are more similar to them are responding to the BRI. Your assets and your expertise are similar. So you will be competing with these countries, not just for BRI contracts, but also to influence the political outcomes. I hope to give you some insight into how the different actors in the UK, the political, the financial, and the business actors, engage with one another and with China. Because while in theory, Britain has not yet formally made a political commitment to the BRI, in reality, Britain is so deeply embedded in the economics of the BRI project that any attempt to separate itself in the future from the BRI would be like trying to separate oil and water. Through this introduction, I hope you will see more clearly the decision-making that can either pull a country towards the BRI or push it away. This one. First, a brief overview of what the BRI really is. It's easy to describe the BRI as a series of roads and railways and sea routes being carved out by China across Eurasia, through the Asia Pacific, down the Indian Ocean, and into the continent of Africa. To me, the BRI has two elements. The first is practical, the second philosophical. The practical element is more than bridges and roads. The practical element is transnational highways, telecommunication networks, high-speed railways, power stations, oil and gas pipelines, aviation hubs, and strategically placed industrial parks and free trade zones along the route. The philosophical initiative is that the BRI is now China's overarching foreign policy, and it is Xi Jinping's personal international grand strategy. This is important because to cooperate with the BRI from a Europe perspective means not just investing funds or assisting infrastructure projects or providing professional services. It also means endorsing China's foreign policy ambitions. For the UK, the timing of this endorsement is particularly important. This is because any future trade deal with China will need to be one with an enormous political dimension. The BRI will have a hub in Europe, but it is not yet certain where that hub will be. So far this year, the premiers of 4 European countries, Hungary, Serbia, Ireland, and just last week, Italy, have expressed a desire to be China's first partner and best friend in Europe. But the choice is really only between Britain and France. And over the past year, and increasingly in the past 6 months, China has signaled